workshops, one of the first things we did together as a group was to work out what the vision is. What is the vision for the entrance? Because that enables us to create a direction and a goal as we start to pull the pieces together. And that vision, and I hope everyone can see it, I know it's a bit glary, is the Entrance Town Centre is a vibrant seaside and lakeside community, a welcoming place to live, to holiday and to work. This beautiful coastal township with its beaches, extensive waterways, bushland reserves and varied day and nighttime activities provides an enviable lifestyle for people of all ages. The Entrance Town Centre is a well-connected hub with thriving and sustainable retail, commercial and professional services. Now from that process, that led us to the next step, which is the preparation of some urban design principles. Now when we first started this, there were 10, 20 different principles. The point of the principles was to guide us in any decisions that we make later on and help us test any ideas that we had later on to see if they fit within the principles. And it was basically just to set the framework so that we knew we were on the right track when we were partway through the project. So we narrowed down those huge amount of principles down to 5. And then we worked through with the group, and when you actually read the document, the report itself, there are a series of points that rest underneath each of those 5 points. Now I haven't put them all here because this would take a very long time to go through it, but to get the idea across, that the 5 key principles were to create public spaces. These are places for people. These are places that are lively and exciting and attractive. The entrance already has some of those, but we need to build those into it to make them greater. 2, provide connectivity. That's connectivity from the greater region into the entrance. That is connectivity within the entrance, so people can move around, whether you are active, whether you are infirm, whether you're frail, whether you're wheelchair bound or you're a small child. We need to make the entrance accessible to everybody. Number 3 is about adopting an innovative approach. This is the time to think outside of the box. This is the time to think really big. Bigger than the Central Coast mentality that unfortunately can encumber this place. We need to think that we are just as good as anybody else and we can make a big difference here. And 4, create a strong urban framework that embraces the assets of the locality. That's about the idea that if it's not broken, don't fix it. There's a lot of good things in the entrance already. There's a lot of things that make it a really great place to be. For instance, Vera's Water Garden. It is one of the most successful places already. Central Coast Tourism get most of the calls about it. What we want to do is enhance that, not start from scratch and toss it out. So that's what this process must do. Look at what's good and we must build upon it. And 5, respect a rich and layered history. This is the hardest one to probably to ever explain, but the most important and difficult concept for people to grasp is this isn't just about preservation of history. There are historical buildings and there's a lot of things that are already in the entrance that give it its history. What we have to remember is that every person in this room and anyone who's been involved in this master plan is creating our layer, our asset to history. One day someone's going to look back on us and might want to preserve something that we put in place. So it's about a balancing act between all the different layers of past, present and future. Because we need to sort of keep all of those in check at the same time. So once we got those principles in place, we started understanding, well, we have to bring the master plan together. So the way this process works, I've used the word layers already, and a master plan is comprised of many, many layers. And each of those layers have a different component to them, and you bring them all together, that forms a master plan. It's like a book. You read a book from front to back, and each page is very important to the story. You take one page out, you take a layer out, the story doesn't make sense, or the master plan falls apart. So we've been very, very careful along the way to make sure that every layer is right, that relates to the other layers, and doesn't upset the others, basically. And the other layers should all enhance each other and make the others stronger. So each of these layers, I'm going to go through now. I will go through them very quickly, and I apologise for that because there's a lot, and you don't want to hear me talking for 2 hours to try to get through them. Because the thing to remember is a town or a city or even a village is comprised of so many different moving parts. It's very hard for me in this short space of time to really get you to understand all the different bits and pieces. So that's why I really encourage you to read the report, and so the briefing that I will give you now will help you sort of understand the logic and the motivation behind a lot of the things that have been put together. But, so I do apologise if I skim over them a little bit too quickly, but we can discuss them a bit more later on. Alright, first layer, open space. Open space is the lungs of the town. Especially in the entrance, it fringes the edge of the entrance. And what we're showing here is that we need to bring those fingers, the green fingers need to slide their way into the centre. At the moment, there isn't much connectivity, and what it's showing to us is there was a need for a centre, a green centre. Now when I say green centre, I'm not meaning literally green. It may have the characteristics and the qualities of a park open space, but we want to sort of reflect those similar characteristics. The second slide, the second diagram, the key iconic development sites. This is probably one of the most crucial layers in the entire master plan. We have 7 key iconic development sites. Dunleith Tourist Park, the key site, actually, Ed Tide Mall, yep. Short Street Car Park, yep. Lakeside Plaza, the Greens Bowling Club, Clumper Water Park, and that's it. Now, the little yellow diagram shows the relationship between those sites. There's actually some really strong connections between the two of how those sites are actually going to relate to each other. And as you can see, the connection of the two triangles, that's the KFC site, and what we've recognised is that site is incredibly important for the entrance. It's like it's in like the marches between the two areas. It's like an anchor between the two, and it's a really important site that's going to make the two sections connect, being the civic heart of the entrance and the waterfront itself. Now, we've already mentioned about the open space and about it needing sort of the green fingers and you draw their way into the centre. The same logic is about connecting the edges to the centre. We need to find ways to get people to be coming back up into the centre. The waterfront is a fantastic asset, but at the same time, the civic centre of the entrance can have its own identity and can be used to support the waterfront. The other thing we've also identified in the yellow is the need, when we talk about connectivity, the need to link across. The fact at the moment is that the main bridge, the entrance bridge that is currently there, is not conducive to pedestrians walking across. Most people feel like they're taking their life into their own hands and get swept off the top by a passing car. And the access to it, the level changes that bring you up to that bridge aren't accessible to people in wheelchairs, and they are not, it doesn't promote the concept of connectivity. The basic way to describe when Central Coast Tourism have had their feedback about the differences between the north entrance and the entrance, the words have come back like it might as well be on the other side of the world. And a lot of people complain who are staying at some of the northern parks a bit further up the north, say that when there's festivals and events, they can't get into the entrance and they can't park, and so they just don't bother coming in. So the next one is another very important one. It's paths and destinations. Now this takes into account all the previous layers that we've been looking at. It takes into account where's our open space network and the connections that tie all of those together. Where are the iconic buildings? Because those iconic buildings are going to be attractions and destinations in their own right. So how do we link them all together, and what else is happening along the way? Because the way a promenade works, it's the same as a shopping centre. You've got 2 anchors, and you activate what is in between because of those 2 anchors, and you get people to move backwards and forwards. We're trying to get people onto the street to be walking throughout the entrance, to really promote a walkable city. So what we went through is we picked up all of those key iconic sites, we picked up all of the other activities that actually are happening along the way, and said, well, these are the paths that are going to connect them. Who can benefit from enlivening those spaces that are in between? And that gives other retail or other cafes or other activities a chance to grow and develop because of those other anchors. Hotspots and quiet places. Now, hotspots and quiet places are the two different types of areas that generally make a town really exciting. Hotspots are places where people congregate, there's lots of talking, lots of music, lots of action. People gravitate towards because it's exciting. And that could be anything. It could be somewhere where music is played, it could be a carnival atmosphere, it could be just a place where people just want to hang out and talk rather loudly. On the contrary to that is a quiet place, somewhere you want to contemplate, relax, you want to escape from things a little bit, you might just want to read a book sitting under a tree. And those two different places, we need a good balance between the two. And the more of those we have, which as you can see, we've been able to identify quite a few of those places, the more exciting, the more interesting a place actually can be. Cycleways. Now, cycleways is a connection, it's part of that paths and destinations layer. So what we've done is we've dissected from that layer New South Wales cycleway program that is already in place. At the moment, the entrance is a big missing gap as part of that. Okay, now, cars. Like it or not, vehicular movement framework really sort of controls a lot of what happens in a town. And the logic behind what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people out of their car as soon as possible and out on the street. The sooner you get people on the street, the more activity and things are happening, the more they're going to engage with all the different shops, and the more people are going to engage with each other. What we're proposing is that we already have the bypass. Bypass currently runs in the red line along the back. Works very well, so we want to take advantage of that and utilise that to the best of our ability. So what we're proposing is that we set up the entrance into one of the entry points into the entrance so they can actually start feeding back off this bypass. So everyone doesn't have to come through the main road as they currently are now. What we're trying to do is create a loop. Because at the moment we have a single street and everyone's trying to get up and down that and trying to sort of navigate from all different areas. So what we're proposing is some changes to the road that runs back behind the main road and actually create a circuit around the entrance and use the laneways that are currently back behind to service the main road and service all of these buildings that run down at this point here. Now if you look at the next diagram, the yellow band indicates the best public car parking locations. Now I'm not saying the whole thing is going to be public car parking, but these are the locations that enable us to actually get people to filter onto the streets. So you can see the red dashed line that runs its way around. What we're saying is that people go into the back, into the yellow section, park their car, move through to the main street, and then filter out onto the street. And so anywhere along that point, public car parking can be proposed. So when you start to see the convergence between the pedestrian and the vehicular layers, that's what we start to see. We start to pick up all of these different public car parking spaces. Now, as I said before, these aren't just car parking stations. These are places where it's a transitional space, where you transition from car to being on foot, from cycle to being on foot, from a car to a bike, or any sort of different combination that you can imagine. That's what we're trying to get people out of the cars as quickly as possible and use them to filter and activate everywhere else. You can also see now how the layer of the promenades, destinations and paths add as that other layer over the top. Now, the next one, and I'm more than happy to come back to the car parking lanes and all these kind of things. I know it is a bit much to sort of absorb very quickly, but we can always come back to it. Okay, the next one, key sites and precinct formation. Now, as I said earlier on, the 7 key iconic sites are really, really important to the entrance. They are really forming the bones of what's going to happen in the future. So what we started to notice were there were 2 key precincts generally being formed, the Waterfront Precinct and the Civic Centre Precinct. There Then we noticed there were other developing precincts that were building on top of those. So on top of the waterfront precinct and the civic centre precinct, you have a civic support zone, which we currently have a number of churches and schools already located in. These kind of activities are best located outside of the cities, out of the town centre. It's less traffic congestion and other things like that. And again, that's one of the reasons why we want to use the bypass as much as possible to get people into the centre of the entrance rather than trying to come in from the back end. And then the two yellow wings that run off to the side are the two residential living wings. And what we've demonstrated is that we need to link, we need to connect and filter in to those zones. Now, activity areas, this starts to go down into a little bit more detail. So you can still see the parking zone that's been identified, but that has other uses within it. You'll have other mixes of civic and retail uses and other cultural type of activities. But you can start to see how the green fingers are now starting to connect back into the centre. That's our urban centre, that's our heart of the town centre, and we've actually called that the town square, and that's a series of urban public spaces that have the characteristics of open space. So there will be trees in there, there'll be places to sit and contemplate, places where you can have performances or impromptu performances, places for children to play and enjoy themselves while parents might be having a cup of coffee or something along those lines. Now, the darker peach colour is the civic, yep, that's it. That's the civic and retail hub that wraps itself around the town centre. So inside of that space is it's two key iconic sites. You've got the new retail and the big shopping centre, and we don't know what, at this point in time, the Short Street car park site will be. That's what council is working on at the moment. So, yeah, we're not entirely sure exactly how that's going to work. But the lighter pink colour that then wraps, yeah, exactly where it begins, running, and it runs all the way down to the water, can be cultural mixed use, variety of art spaces, cultural spaces, music and food, activities that can feed off the anchors, being the key iconic sites, and that can enliven and provide some other activities. It might be artist studios, it might be bookstores, it might, who knows what it might be, but there'll be more cultural mixed uses within there. So this is what the master plan ends up looking like, and it's, I think the best way, rather than me trying to point out each individual thing, because we've sort of generally gone through them, I'm going to go through the next slides, which zoom in on all the different areas. So now they're all integrated and absorbed into it. So this is a 3D model that we produced, and there's other images further on in the presentation. You can start to see how these things all start to overlap. The buildings actually are shown in here, are shown at the heights that are being considered by the varying developers, and the spaces in between, which aren't key sites, are the heights that are proposed in the DCP. So the first slide I'm going to go to is this space down at the waterfront. Most people know as Memorial Park. It has Vera's Water Garden. It has a series of restaurants and cafes and the stage down in this area. Now, what we're proposing here is to really make this into the, we describe it as the waterfront playground. It's an exciting and lively place. And it's a place that will be lively and exciting 24/7, rain, hail and shine. And the Memorial Park that is currently there is a great space, but it's not being utilised to its potential at the moment. What we're proposing is to make it into a much larger space that can hold varying performances and other activities, and for that we proposed a new stage. The space slightly to the northeast, maybe it goes a little bit further up, no, number 8. We've given all these things varying names. We call this one Marketplace. Now, you might recall, and you might all be shocked to see that there used to be a car park in the, well, it is currently a car park. We've shown as an extension to Memorial Park, which will enable this to be used for markets, for other kind of activities that affect the quality of the surface. For instance, in Memorial Park, the grass is getting destroyed and it can't be maintained much better than it is, considering they've got cars driving on it, things parking on it, and really destroying the surface. This will be a mixture of soft and hardscapes where cars during, say, Chrome Fest can park, or the market stalls can be put in place. But the stage will be multi-directional so that both can be activated at the same time. Pelican feeding will still remain exactly where it is. I think it would be a hard job trying to get the pelicans to go somewhere else, considering how long they've been coming there. But just basically enhancing the pavement treatment, things like that, and getting the signage sorted out. Vera's Water Garden, we'll be enhancing that, making it a bigger and more exciting place. It's a great spot at the moment. It just looks a little bit tired and worn, but what we're hoping to do is drag some of the elements a little bit closer up towards the main entries into this precinct. So the kids see it when they come along, and they know that it's there, and they can just jump in and get it and start playing as soon as they can. You might all know there's a couple of heritage carnival elements down in the waterfront at the moment, and they're heritage listed. The location is not heritage listed, the items are themselves. And I do know they have a lot of heritage items sitting away in the background that they can't put anywhere, that we can actually create like a little mini carnival in this location. And they said that they are very keen to actually enhance it and enliven it a little bit further. And there's actually things that they haven't even put on those carnival elements because they're not secure enough at this point in time. So we would actually propose a proper space that was enclosed and secure, so parents at least know if their children in there aren't going to run off and disappear. But also, when people go into it, you feel like you're entering into a carnival type atmosphere. So you go through a gate and there'll be lights and it'll be exciting. Now the other thing as well with this master plan is that we are proposing the partial closure of Marine Parade, similar to the closure that was originally done with the entrance road as it used to run down in front of the shops down before. Now it will still be open during other events, so you can have performances and you can have parades running down the main street that connect up into Marketplace. But the point of it is, as I said to you earlier, the key site, KFC site, is a really important building, and its relationship to this place down here should be seamless and integral. And that road that is currently running between might as well be a wall. It is a very powerful barrier. And so what we're proposing is in front of the key site, down where number 2 is a new plaza and a new square that actually addresses the front of that building. We dubbed it Anzac Square so because it relates to the memorial that is in front of it. We have not touched the memorial. The memorial will stay exactly where it is. But what it means is when there are Anzac services or other things like that, there is actually a bigger space and a more formal space to actually congregate and hold those services. The 3 thresholds that you enter in, it's about creating and generating that feeling of excitement. They are slightly compressed spaces, and we're looking at ideas about putting lighting and other sort of really festive kind of attributes that mean when people enter into the space, they get a feel of excitement. They know that they're in the place that they were heading for. Things like that tell people how to behave. We've got a lot of social problems in the entrance, and we're all very aware of that. Things like this tell people when you're entering into a space, there's certain innate rules that you may not be aware of that you must adhere by. And what we are trying to do is try to put a lot of subtle things throughout the urban landscape that encourage people to act and behave in certain ways. And it's been very successful in some other precedents that we've been looking at. Okay, now just go back for a second. Alright, so we've just had a look at the waterfront. Now this is the connection that moves its way across to North Entrance. So up to the top here, you can see where the connection starts, right to the top of the page view. Yep, there. And then that then connects us to the first part of the water walk. Now the water walk has a landward anchor, and that is what we described as the pier. And on the pier we'll have various different activities like concession stands, places you buy ice cream, things like that. But it most importantly provides a connection to the water. Places where people can actually get down, connect and immerse themselves in the water. Obviously when there's water in there. The water walk itself, crossing, is a bridge.
Reactivate that bridge.
And then it connects across the other side to a lake pool. One of the most important findings that has been found, especially by Central Coast Tourism, is that there is an extraordinary level of fear of a lot of tourists and locals about swimming in the ocean. I am one of them. Just not confident swimmers, and they're looking for places where they can swim safely, and lake kind of settings are really, really popular. So what we were proposing was a really sort of relaxed, informal pool. This is very different to the ocean bars. Ocean bars are about lane swimming. That's a more formal sort of recreational sort of exercise type of place. This one is just about having a lot of fun, throwing things around, and just enjoying the water. And yet, and again, there is a connection down to the water. And we've also proposed a little tower that will extend up, that is a solar tower that will actually provide solar power to generate all the power for the bridge. So when it's lit at night and other various things happen, it doesn't draw on the grid. Now, with the actual form of the bridge, now one of the key drivers for the bridge is not just about its connections across the water. It's incredibly important to have that physical connection to connect the two sides, but it's also the power that this bridge actually can bring to the entrance. Now, a lot of you might have seen the photo montage that's been in the papers. That image is an archetypical bridge. It's not necessarily what it's going to look like. That is not our place to design it. An archetypical bridge is literally just what is the kind of way that you would draw a bridge so people know it's a bridge. It could have absolutely any form it could take on. Now, a lot of the motivation behind this is about getting people to the entrance. And historically, and I'm not talking ancient history, I'm talking about recent history, people have been using sculptural forms, because in this situation we're proposing a very sculptural bridge. And in fact, we would propose a sculptor be brought on board to actually design it. And that sculptural form becomes an iconic form that becomes the postcard image, the image that personifies the entrance. And those mechanisms have been used very, very successfully to get international recognition. And now we're not talking about just from a tourism potential, we're talking about mechanisms to bring in permanent residents who want to come and live here, places that they will want to go and take their family and friends and show off when they come here. Now, you might think I'm a little bit crazy for saying things like that. Who's going to want to come to the entrance? I mean, the entrance is just the entrance. But it's been done, and it's been done by towns in England, Spain, various countries around the world who are bringing people to their town through sculpture, through art, through iconic architectural forms, who want to come and see it. It's on their best thing to do before their die list. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, I could go on about this for ages, and we're in the moment in the process of identifying the processes on how we would actually get someone. We're actually having conversations with various people in London right now to sort of understand the processes that this might take. But it's definitely an achievable situation. Okay, I'll go back again, get ourselves oriented. Picnic Point. I'm sure most of you know Picnic Point. There's a space right up the top here. What our concept here is the really intensive part of Picnic Point. This is where all the activity happens, and leave a lot of the areas more passive type spaces that run further down towards longevity. Now, this is very, very indicative. This could end up any kind of design, but it's more about what's in it. It's about the concept and the content within it. So we've got we proposed an urban skate park that is more of a plazas type skate park than a traditional skate park. I know a lot of people get really nervous about them. They think of sort of really poor social behaviour and things like that. But a lot of these spaces now are being designed so that they are integrated into the landscape, so they are urban spaces just as much used for the skateboarders. They are places that can be used by anybody. And then integrated into those type of spaces, we've got children's playgrounds and bike tracks. We've got exercise stations where people can run along the tracks. They can run around from Berkeley Vale and Chittaway Point if they want and partake in the equipment there. We're proposing an upgrade of the boat ramp so you can actually get more boats in and out if needed. A small community building there in the centre so that it can relate back to the youth service. And a series of picnic gathering type spaces that support those areas. Basically, when you want to let your dog run. Off-leash area, that's it, but it's actually an enclosed area. So that you can take your dog in there, you know it's not going to run out on the road or disrupt any other poor person not maybe partial to dogs, in the other area. And very popular for people doing long drives up the coast while they're on holidays. They need a place to let their dog out, stretch their legs, have a drink. They can grab a cup of coffee or something while they're at it, and the dogs get to socialise. And they're also really good for the community because there's a really strong social interaction from other dog owners in the area. The location that we've shown may not be the final location. We are sort of having discussions with council about certain species that might be in the area that might conflict, but the concept of the dog park is still a really important one in the area. Across to the northern side, across to Dunleith. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and then the next one gets a bit tricky because these are one of the iconic sites and they're outside of the process. So from a master plan perspective, it was more the fact that we identified they are incredibly important sites and very valuable to the master plan and to the entrance, but we didn't go in and provide the detailed design for that master because it's not appropriate for this master plan to do so. It's a separate exercise. But essentially, it is providing that link with the water walk and continuing it across and continuing it to head back over to the parks to the west. But also really emphasise the purpose of the iconic sites, which is to get the height, maximise the height and developable footprint of those buildings, and then give the ground space, like Vivian was saying before, give that back to the community. This means you don't have buildings which cover the entire site and you end up with shorter buildings but nothing for anyone else to enjoy. There's no greenery, there's no public spaces, there's no places for people to interact, and that's what this concept is about. And this is what this site will actually adopt that same philosophy. Okay, this is the town square. I won't go back to this because I'm sure you will remember where this one was. But this is right in the town centre, Lakeside Shopping Centre and Short Street Car Park. This was the trickiest one of them all because there are 3 iconic sites within the vicinity. Because they are going to be developing much of the public spaces around them, we weren't in a position, as I just said, to actually do any sort of detailed design for them. But basically what we really emphasised, and in the report comes a series of guidelines and recommendations that we have made saying how these public spaces really should feel and how they should be interacting with the community and should have all the characteristics of public open spaces. And then basically this is, just to get yourself oriented, I've got this diagram here, that's ebb tide, Short Street's in the middle, and then that's Lakeside Shopping Centre. And so really creating a series of public spaces within there and really sort of trying to link and activate and get people to move through the town centre. The other thing that has been discussed, and obviously there is a lot of work to go through before these things can be resolved further, but there is an opportunity perhaps for a busing change to perhaps going to ebb tide more and actually get people to move in. Actually, I need another diagram to show that. We're going to go this way. As we were talking about before with the road that was running behind, we would use the road to come in, buses would drop in from behind and filter people in and out on onto the street. But again, there is a lot of water to go under the bridge before that one is resolved. So here are a couple of images of what it could look like. It is so expensive to build. It's extraordinarily expensive, and there's no money in it. And why should they invest their money into these type of developments if they can't make any money out of it? And they have to get the rationalisation of the height in order for that to work.
Can I just interrupt just for a moment? Just on the height, we're currently talking to the key site property owners. El Largo, yeah, also Lakeside, all of the key sites. So none of these are final heights at this stage. When we were undertaking the workshop and the master plan, these were the heights that they were looking at, but there's been no final determination on what those heights might be at this stage. Well, we put them into the master plan just to show you that there is going to be there is a greater height. And the concept, as Christy was saying, is basically you go up higher. That allows you then to develop the space around the building. So into more green space, more space where people can enjoy activities and attractions.